So I've heard a lot of talk about the church camp high.
Okay.
I've even seen some videos on it recently. And basically, for any of our viewers that don't know what that is, it's basically you go to church camp or a conference and you have this spiritual moment. You have this encounter with God, if you will, and you come back home and you're so excited. You're ready to change the world. You're ready to make an impact, in your school, in your home, in your community. And then over time, that high just starts to drain a little bit, slowly drain a little bit more. And then sometimes for these teens or students, they just go right back into where they were before.
Old habits.
Yeah, they start to go back into some of those old habits. And, some of these people that have been talking about the church camp high have been critical of camps and conferences. And that's one of the reasons why, is they're just like, well, why are you just hyping them up, basically, with emotional worship and, giving them sugar highs and, all this kind of thing if they don't really change. But I think there's a lot of positive aspects from church camp or conference. And I think there's even some that you and I or, any adult can apply to our lives. Because think of some of the things that are great about church camp. You're disconnecting from everything for a little period of time.
Yep.
Yeah, you're disconnecting. You're spending intentional time in Scripture. You're eating together. You're laughing together. You're praying for one another. You've got a good community that surrounds you.
Yep.
And I think those are all great biblical things that we all need to apply, not just for kids that are going to camp and everything.
That's right. So, yeah, I like that you brought this up. I think it's important. I was thinking about it as you were talking about my conversation with my 14-year-old daughter. When she was 13, she went to Clyde. And going into that conference, I was a little concerned.
Okay.
Because I was wondering if she's going to encounter God at this conference, in the sense that it wasn't just a hype.
Okay.
Right? Like
yeah,
I wanted to know if she was gonna do the things to further connect herself with God at her age.
Yeah.
And I know that a conference like Collide can be distracting to a kid. Although it's great, but there's just a lot of hype there. And so I gave it a few days after Clyde, and we always do, had our car ride, and I just started having a conversation with her about, hey Reese, so what did you think about Clyde? And not really knowing what the answer was going to be, she said, well, I took a lot of notes.
Okay.
And I actually, there was a speaker there, and she mentioned the speaker by name, that really stood out to me.
Okay.
And really felt like he was talking to me. And so it was a really good conversation with her. And that told me right there that she's plugged in, right? And so thinking about that, the thing I talked to her about next is what I think you're saying is, okay, you went to the Clyde conference, it was great. Where do you go from there?
Right.
Because Clyde ain't gonna last a year.
Exactly.
Like you have these moments, this encounter with God. How do we extend that? And so with her, and this is obviously biblical, what you're saying is like she has a good friend group.
Good.
She reads the Word with us as a family. She's quite a bit. So plugging into that Word every day builds faith.
Yes.
Right. Praying with Him builds trust, and He never fails us.
Absolutely.
So that's how you know He never fails us, by praying with Him. And,
yeah.
And so I thought that was really good to have her. And so as I'm sitting here thinking about that, it's like, what does that mean for other people, Josh? Like, not just going to church camp or a conference.
Right.
Like, how do you extend that every day? Because that's what we're talking about.
Right.
And just so we're clear, what we don't want to be viewed as is criticizing the church for that. That's not what we're doing. We're more along addressing the individual who goes to that camp or that conference.
Right, absolutely. Just because, like, I've been a youth leader for a number of years, and I've seen conferences happen, I've seen camps happen, I've seen trips happen, and almost every time there will be this one student on the trip that gets really excited about things, and then, like we said earlier, that excitement starts to wear off after they've been home for a while. They'll start going back to some of their old friend groups and then their old habits. Then they'll show back up for the next big thing.
Nothing's changed.
And nothing's changed. And then eventually, sadly, sometimes they'll walk away from their faith and be like, oh, this wasn't real. I just got excited for a minute or two kind of thing. I was tripping. But I think it was very much real, and that God was trying to talk to them.
Absolutely.
God was trying to get their attention. but I think it's important to develop our spiritual lives beyond just that conference moment, or just beyond that that church camp moment. And some of the ways that we can do that is to keep showing up. That's the phrase I keep hearing: keep showing up, and not just showing up for an hour on Sunday for church. That's great, but that's the bare minimum. I think we have to be intentional about studying the scriptures, about having people in our lives that know what's going on, that know, hey, you made that commitment, to stop doing whatever habit.
Hold you accountable.
Yeah, at camp. How's that going for you?
Yeah.
We need people that we can just eat with and have fun with too, on top of all that. But we just have to keep showing up, even when, sometimes we don't want to. Because there can be times when we're studying the scripture that it's the most exciting thing. We can't journal fast enough, the insight that God's given us from that. Yeah. And then there's other times we'll show up to read and we can barely stay awake.
Yeah.
But if we stay consistent, I believe we'll grow. We'll start to see the fruit of the Spirit in our own lives, all the peace, love, joy, all that.
Yeah.
If we just keep showing up.
And when I think about, and I'm saying this in kids, when we think about the kids that have stuck around, they're doing that.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that's the difference, is every day they're plugging into something. Now, does that make them perfect?
No.
And are they still going to make mistakes?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And are they always going to show that their behaviors changed in a perfect way like you'd like them to? Maybe not. But what it does show is they're getting into the Word.
Yeah.
They're learning really what faith is.
Yeah.
And faith is always ever growing. Like, you'll never be absolute, right? Like, you'll never have 100% faith in the sense of you're perfect and everything always works out. I find that faith is an everyday thing.
Absolutely.
And so they'll find that out, and I think they'll continue to pursue that. So what we're seeing on our end of things in our community is we're seeing a bunch of kids getting it right.
Yes.
And that's the great thing. And so that's what I would say to people who often criticize church is like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We're seeing a little bit opposite of that. Not to say that there aren't kids that aren't coming back and going back in their life. That's definitely happening. But I think that in that criticism, you're forgetting the good things, right? Absolutely. And so those kids that will either go to that camp or that collide are winning other kids. And that's obviously the hope in our youth, is that these kids will disciple these other kids.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll get that right. And so I view it as our job, Mox, to make sure we're mentoring those kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And some of these kids are practically begging for it. They would absolutely love to sit down with you or I, older men, and have us walk them through the scriptures together. This generation's craving truth more than any generation I've ever seen. They're different. They're special. I mean, they're not showing up as much for the hype, for the fog machines and the loud music and all that kind of thing. That's fine.
Yeah.
But what they're craving is
substance.
Getting into the depth of, going through the scripture, having that community around them.
I'm seeing that with my daughter's age's friends.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it with students from probably about the age of your daughter on up into some college age guys that I know. And that's really encouraging for me to see, and causes me to be really hopeful for the next generation coming up and even the one after that. So, yeah. For our challenge for you guys, we want you to look at how the early church did community, because it's a lot of the things that we're describing as we're sitting here talking to you.
Yeah.
Read Acts 2, verses 42 through 47 to get an idea of how the early church lived some of these things out and how God grew their number daily. But until next time, I'm Josh.
I'm Johnny.
And we dare you to hope.